All right, so this is gonna be a bit different than my typical videos. The reason why I'm shooting my video this way is because for some reason, all of my cameras right now are completely dead, so I'm charging them. And I don't have a tripod for my iPhone. I have no idea where my tripod is, so I'm just gonna hold it. But the idea of this video came to mind. I thought it was thought-provoking, and I wanted to share it with you guys and kind of see what your takes are. Now, if you read the title of this video, you probably understand where I'm going with this video. And recently I was kind of going through threads and I saw an interesting, thread. And it said, it was something along the lines of, I'll post it, if I can find it again, I'll post it somewhere on the screen. But it was something along the lines of, only men benefit in marriages. So why do women participate in marriage? And I thought that was an interesting premise. And I want to point this out before I get into my thoughts on this thread. When I see takes like this, I know what most people do is they do this divisive thing, like men versus women. I'm objective for the most part. I try to be as objective as I possibly can. So when I see a topic like that that's thought-provoking and is sort of counter to what most people believe, I will challenge it or I'll look into it. But I'm coming in with complete open mind and I'm open to that premise being correct. Hopefully that makes sense. And so I read that and I was like, that's interesting to me, because I would imagine if you were to ask most men and if you were to kind of really do some good digging and really get deep into really trying to figure out what men think about marriage, I would say most men would probably disagree that marriage benefits men a lot.
So this is editing Lenny from the future of the recording of this video. I just want to point this out. I typed in male view of marriage because my point, and you'll see this throughout the rest of this video, is that you can't assume that what you believe is beneficial for a certain party is beneficial to them. Does that make sense? They need to be the ones to determine whether or not they believe it's beneficial. So I wanted to make this clear because I feel like in order for you to get an idea of what men would consider is beneficial in a marriage, they need to be the ones that are claiming it's beneficial. Same with women. If a man wanted to say that women benefit A, B, and C from marriage, it needs to be a woman that determines that. You can't put your beliefs onto them. So I want to make this clear, and that's why I typed in male view of marriage to see exactly what men believe are the benefits, the pros, the cons, whatever of marriage. One more quick thing, I don't want to go too long. I want to get back to the original video. I did want to say this, because some people, when I was debating on threads, they were saying that my YouTube videos don't count. And yet every video that they shared with me was basically a survey. And to me, my thought process was, what better survey than the YouTube comments? You, in a study, will survey 100,000 people. A YouTube video might have 10 million views. And you can see the comments and see that in those views, there are about 100,000 comments, 200,000 comments, 300,000 comments, etc. And you can do this across multiple videos with a bunch of different users. This is all survey. This is all data. So what's the difference? Just my 2 cents. Wanted to kind of ask that question to you guys. But yeah, back to the video.
And even more so, the premise was only men benefit from marriage. And that's a key thing to consider, because as I'm kind of reading this, I'm kind of going through threads and debating people and giving my 2 cents and trying to get some more insight onto where they got this data from. And from what I found is a lot of people, how do I put this? A lot of people don't understand really how to read. I know that sounds condescending, but I'm really picky about arguments, because some people will have an argument that says men, basically like this one, only men benefit in marriage. That only part makes this whole premise very specific. If you say only men benefit, that means by default women have no benefit from marriage. And if I'm going to argue a point, the first thing I'm going to argue is that women have at least one benefit from marriage. And if I can argue that point, then technically your whole premise is incorrect. Does that make sense? And so that's what I did. And so I'm kind of asking, I asked in the threads, I find this to be interesting. Can you please share some data, sharing what you found to apparently be true, because you put this premise up and people agree. So share some data that suggests that. And I'm open to it. I'll read it. I'll read all of it. And I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed. I'll be brutally honest, I was disappointed, because I really thought that people would be open-minded and they'd share some good insights, some good data, really suggesting why men only benefit from marriage. And I would even be open to people saying men benefit more in marriage than women. I'd be open to seeing that. I got no good data that suggested that. Now, I will say this. me being a guy making this suggestion, me being a guy contesting this premise, I think already will come off as someone trying to mansplain or hate or just debate for no reason. And that's not really what I was doing. That's not the purpose of this. The whole idea of like mansplaining stuff like that to me is ridiculous anyway. I think if you're a grown adult that says stuff like mansplaining, or if you can't just sit there and have a conversation with somebody of the opposite gender or the same gender or sex, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to be brutally honest. It's super immature. It's super low IQ in my opinion. It's something that we need to kind of get rid of. And I knew when I made that reply, I knew people were going to be like, oh, he's a guy trying to challenge what we believe. Therefore, we must challenge him and we must give him no points and just kind of give what we emotionally believe to be true rather than actually give him a logical argument, which is what he's asking for. He's asking for just data, which is what you should do. If you have a premise, you support it with data. So long story short, I got like no good data. I did get like 2 or 3 articles, and I want to kind of talk about those articles, and I want to talk about articles and statistics in general. I know, like, if you're watching this is probably not going to be like the most interesting video ever. It's already going to look ugly because I'm shooting with my iPhone and holding with my camera here. But I see problems like this often, and I like to address them because what I see a lot is people do not understand statistics. People don't understand statistics. People don't understand data. People don't understand research. And the issue I have is that in the modern era, what people do is, for one, they don't even read the data. They don't care about the data. They see a headline that sounds catchy and they run with it and take that headline as fact. And I find this often. The headline will be catchy and the headline will be polarizing. But if you read like one paragraph of the study itself might disagree with the headline. Not even like a little bit, not like it's open to interpretation. The study might just say, this is not good research. Don't take this as like religion. Like, take this with a grain of salt. The headline's the headline, but the actual thing that we found does not match the headline. We just put the headline there to get you to click it because we need clicks to get traffic to our website because that's how we make money. Does that make sense? And so a lot of these studies were the exact same way. My counter, I'm gonna get into the studies too, but I wanna give them my counters. And I'll put, if I can find some, I'll put some up here so you can read them too. Because maybe I'm full of crap and maybe people have better arguments. And I'm totally open to it. I'm open to it. In the comments below, if you have a counter to anything I post, please share it. I might debate you on it because that's what I do, but I'm open to it. I'm not trying to be biased. I'm just giving my 2 cents. So I think one of the original counters I did, I said in the threads was, I'm open to believing that men only benefit from marriage, but you got to give me some objective points on how they only benefit. And you don't have to give data. You can just give me like, based on what you see in real life, what could be the case. Now I said the caveat to that is, it needs to be something that a man would consider better or beneficial. It cannot be something that only you, as the woman in the relationship, considers beneficial. And I make that point explicitly because I tend to find that what people do is they put words in other people's mouths. So they'll say like, oh yeah, this guy, like if you're, you know, a woman in a relationship, she might say, oh, my husband benefits so much from my relationship. Oh, how does he benefit, Sally? Oh, well, he benefits so much because he likes to give me attention and he loves doing A, B, and C for me and he loves to spoil me. And it's like, did he say that? And is that something he's always wanted? Or did you just believe it to be true and maybe he just doesn't challenge it? Because those are different things. He might not say he disagrees, but you can internally disagree with something and just not want to debate with people or not want to get into arguments. He might not like doing it. He might not find it beneficial. So we're kind of going down that rabbit hole. And I was saying, I think more objectively, if you were to ask a lot of guys if they think marriage is super beneficial or super appealing, I would say that a lot of modern data and the way men behave in general would suggest otherwise. You know, you see a lot of men nowadays, they're pretty resistant to marriage. I think if you're a girl, try to get some random guy to marry you. And I think you'll find that it's gonna be quite difficult unless the guy is like really desperate for female attention. Not trying to be mean, just being honest. Like the dudes that get married the quickest in my experience are the guys that want to lock down a girl because they have no other options. So they're trying to find whoever will consider them a decent option. So essentially desperate men. A man that's not desperate is not in a rush to get married, in general. I think a guy that's not desperate, he might meet a good girl and he might quickly want to get married to a good girl. But that's not to say that a man will get married to any girl simply because he desires marriage so much. There's a little bit of nuance to that point. So I would say, like, from a statistical standpoint, from what you just see with dudes like out, go up to a guy and ask him, would you want to get married? A lot of guys will say like, I don't want to because it's expensive. I got to buy a wedding ring. I've literally had this conversation with many men before I got married, and I'm married, and I enjoy my marriage right now. And I don't foresee that changing anytime soon, but I am, I talk to other guys. So, and I'm a dude, so I totally get it where guys come from. A lot of dudes say like even things like sex decreases after marriage. A lot of guys told me that. I think 99% of the dudes I asked about marriage prior to me getting married all said that. Sex declines, money's tighter because you're spending money on yourself, but you're also expected to spend money on your wife. And then when you have kids, you're expected to provide for the entire family. There's the stress burden of it. I've seen conflicting data. Some of the data that the ladies provided in the thread said that men live longer. I've personally seen data that suggests that men die faster from marriage. I'm not too sure the reasons why. I don't think any of the studies have been fantastic of pointing out the why. And I mentioned it in another video, the why is like one of the most important questions you need to ask if you're doing, especially if you're doing research. You need to know the why things are occurring. Never quite saw why. If it's true that men die faster, I would probably attribute it to stress. And I'm not saying that the wife directly stresses them out. I just think like the stress of working, the stress of like maybe not having a good social circle, the stress of just like a bunch of things piles up. And that's probably what leads to men having a shorter lifespan than women. I think, there's probably other factors too. But sorry about the camera being all wobbly. I'm trying to like hold it up. Shoulders getting tired a little bit. But yeah, so I listed a few things that I thought were very valid reasons why a man might not want to get married, and he might see marriage as a downside rather than a benefit. And so I said, okay, I gave you guys a few reasons. Give me a few reasons why you think that first of all, only men benefit, because that was the original premise, that only men benefit. And if you can't give me a reason why only men benefit, at least give me some reasons why men would benefit more than women. Now, this is where I had a major issue, and this is where I kind of started to get a little bit agitated. A lot of the women, when they give their own 2 cents, or even when they provide studies, they all came down to men are happier in marriage, men live longer. And some women said men get a personal assistant. I'll talk about all of those. First of all, the happier thing. My problem with studies about happiness is that happiness is super subjective. And when I actually read through the studies that they provided, they all are self-reports. They're all surveys. Surveys are not good research, in my personal opinion, and in my personal experience. Surveys are decent if you can get a big, like a huge sample size and you can really like define what happiness is and give people a very clear understanding of what you're looking for in the study, then it can be good. Like in those situations, surveys can be good. But you really got to crunch the numbers really well, and you really got to see if there's like a massive trend in one direction. If it's one of those things where you say like, oh, men report being happier in marriages, and you find that's like 54% versus like 46% or something like that, that is not good data, because it's basically down the middle. So it's half and half. So you're not really getting like a good concrete result. Now, if you ask like, say, 1 million guys and 99.9% said, yes, I am happier with marriage, that's more conclusive. Hopefully that makes sense. That's not what I saw. There were no numbers, first of all. They were just like random arbitrary numbers that said more men or most men. What is more? What is most? Give an actual percentage. Give an actual sample size. These studies did not have these things. And I'll link some studies down below. I'm not saying none of the studies had like sample sizes. I think I saw a study from like Harvard. I think they listed like about 109,000 people. I don't think that's a good sample size, to be honest. I think relative to America, that's a terrible sample size. I think it's decent, it's okay. But the problem is if I can't see how you conducted the study, and if I can't see the exact questions you ask, then I can't take that as a true study. And I tend to find sometimes with a lot of like these academic studies, they're not good studies in general. I went to Penn State, and I saw a lot of Penn State studies that were not very good. Because I think that, little side tangent, I think that a lot of the researchers, when they do research, they're either biased by certain groups or maybe corporations or whoever for funding, and they just say the things that certain groups want them to say, or they're not good researchers in the grand scheme of things, and they just put together some research for the sake of putting together research. Does that make sense? It's kind of like when you're in college and you have to do like a class project, if you were like in liberal arts or something like that, and you just do something to get a passing grade. It's like, it's bare minimum effort. It's not good data. It's not a good study. It's just you making something to say that it's been made. Hopefully that point makes sense. So I saw that with the studies. But like I said, with the whole idea of like happiness, it's super subjective, and it doesn't really like benefit the original premise. Again, I want to reiterate this point. The original premise was that only men benefit in a marriage. If you say only men benefit in a marriage, I ask you why, and you say because men are happier in marriage. Some women are happy in marriage too. So your premise is already disproven. You said only men, but she benefits too. The premise is disproven, realistically speaking, because if women didn't get anything from marriage, they wouldn't get married. It's that simple. Like, it's really that simple. If women got nothing from marriage at all, nothing, then the women would see no point in marriage, so they just would stop getting married. And I'm sure a lot of men would be happy with that. They'd be like, oh, I don't have to get married, but I still get to do A, B, and C. I still get all this. Perfectly fine. Yeah, so just that was a horrible take, the happiness thing, because it's super subjective. You can ask one person what their level of happiness is at multiple times throughout the day, and they'll give you different answers for each period of the day, depending on like what they just experienced, the weather, how they feel at a specific time, who's around them, who's asking them. It's not good data. There's too many confounds that will make them give a super subjective answer that's not going to be consistent. So happiness is not a real reason why men benefit more in marriages, even though it's not technically the premise. I saw someone else that says men live longer, so that's the benefit that they get from marriage. It's a weak benefit. I'm gonna be real, it's a weak benefit. And the reason why I said it's a weak benefit, I mentioned earlier when I was kind of debating these people, if you're gonna give a benefit, it needs to be a benefit from the male perspective. So it needs to be something that most men would consider something that's objectively worth having. Living longer might be good for a lot of the women that are responding to me, like when I'm debating. That's perfectly fine. If you want to live long, you can live long. And I'm not saying that men don't value longevity in their lives. But what I am saying is that in the grand scheme of things, there are probably many men, not even probably, there are many men that don't benefit a long life over other things like maybe personal fulfillment or maybe adventure or a certain challenge. You can just see that with behaviors. I'm a huge advocate of actions speak louder than words. I think if you really want to find out how people operate, just watch what they do. Like if someone says to you, I don't enjoy rock climbing, but they spend 7 days a week rock climbing, they're lying to you. They do enjoy it. On some level, they do enjoy it. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it because there's a barrier to entry to do that type of thing. So if a dude says, oh, I value a long life, but he's always racing in super fast cars in very dangerous areas, if he has like a very high risk job and he enjoys that job, if he has very like risky activities in general and he enjoys those things, he doesn't really value longevity that much. He might value it to a degree, but it's not to enough of a degree that it's going to prevent him from doing all the risky stuff that could end his life quickly. And that's the point that I was making. It's like a lot of dudes, the things that they do by default are very risky. A lot of guys don't mind, like you'll see dudes do things like, I know some of these groups would be outliers, but you'll see dudes do things like martial arts. It's kind of risky. You could die. MMA, especially on like a level like UFC. Again, outlier, but I'm just making an example. It's risky and it can cause death, but you see guys still do it because it gives them some thrill or some enjoyment or some excitement. Racing, you see dudes all the time get into fast sports cars, drive really fast. It's reckless. I think more guys, if there were fewer speed limits or if the speed limits weren't that like strict, they'd drive faster because a lot of guys like driving fast. They like the adrenaline of it. They like the speed behind it. They like the power behind driving a fast car. There's lots of reasons. But do men understand it's risky? Of course they do. Dudes don't get into fast cars and think, oh, this will be the safest thing I'll do today. No, they understand it's risky. They understand it's dangerous. They understand they can die, but they do it because the benefit of that risk outweighs the detriment, which could be death. So if you say to me, will men get to live a longer life? It's not a good reason. A lot of men don't seem to value it that much based on their own actions. And I'm talking about as a group. You can easily see this with like young boys even. So you can't even always say that it's something that's socialized into people. People like to play that card too. Oh, it's socialized. It's like, well, how come across like pretty much every culture across the entire planet, this seems to be consistent among young men and this behavior is consistent amongst young women? It's probably not that socialized. Maybe to a degree it is, but I would argue it's more a natural trait for young boys, male as an entire gender or sex, than it is something that's learned. Does that make sense? So basically, that point of happiness and that point of longevity in life, not very valid. It's not something that men would consider super valuable, especially not if your premise is men value this in marriage. And then I saw some people listing like very, in my opinion, just stupid stuff. Like, oh, men benefit because they have a personal assistant. Now, this is where I kind of got frustrated because if you were to say to me that most men would consider their wives personal assistants, I would heavily debate that point. And I think most men nowadays would also heavily debate that point. prior to me getting married, and I'll do a video in the future about my experience as someone who's married and as someone who's been in a relationship for a few years now. Spoiler, I've had a fantastic relationship so far. I don't see it changing. My wife is perfect. And I'm not being that guy just saying that, you know, people are like, oh, Seth, I'm not doing that. I genuinely mean it. Like, I often think I'm lucky to have met her because she was probably one of the, like, literally like the highest quality girl I have met. And I met plenty of girls. But that'll be for another video. But if you were to say that in general, most women, especially like in America, are personal assistants, I would heavily disagree with that. And that's not even me being like insulting. From a pure objective standpoint, most women are working. How can you be an assistant to your husband when both of you work full-time jobs? You have no time to be an assistant. You work your full-time job, you come home and you take care of the kids. She listed things like chores, he has to do laundry. Okay, if you find a guy that is unwilling to do laundry and he does nothing else, then that's you picking terrible partner. That's not men as a whole considering their wife to be just like a servant. That's you being a servant because that's all you probably bring to your relationship. That's a personal problem. That's not a collective men and women problem. Does that make sense? I would argue most women don't do this in the grand scheme of things. I would argue most women are just busy with their own stuff. I would argue that even if you do a little bit of laundry or a little bit of chores, and this might be a bit controversial, it's not that hard. It doesn't take that long. It's not that much effort. It doesn't take much brain power. I think one of the comments was, oh, well, women are expected to cook meals every day. No, you're not. A lot of people eat out half the time, so you're not expected to cook meals every day, first of all. Don't lie. Second of all, if you had to cook a meal every day, cooking's not that hard. You're not Chef Ramsay. You're not cooking a gourmet meal every night. And I think virtually no man expects you to do that. So the idea that you're sitting there coming up with these like crazy like meals, which is like this huge burden on you that men benefit so significantly from, is just bullshit. Let's be real, it's bullshit. Should you cook for your family? Yeah. Can a man cook for his family too? Of course. But if you have a husband that's doing other things, like he's working late or he has a business or something like that, you contributing by cooking while he's contributing by financial means balances it out, in my personal opinion. I'm kind of getting in the way of the camera. It balances it out. So you can't sit there and say that you're an assistant. You're as much of an assistant as he is a breadwinner or an assistant too. So it doesn't count. It's not something that's significantly beneficial. And I would argue that a guy can do those things anyway. Not even can. A guy usually, when he's single, does those things anyway. I know more, and this is a little bit anecdotal, I know more men that can cook than women. So the idea of women saying that they are expected to cook is just not true. Men will happily date a girl who cannot cook. That's just facts. If you meet a girl and she's extremely beautiful and she's extremely nice, has a great personality, and she says, I can't cook, I don't think there's a man alive that would sit there and say, deal breaker, she can't cook, she's perfect in every other way, but she can't cook, therefore I won't date her or marry her. It doesn't happen. If she is unwilling to do like basic chores like laundry or something like that, would it be a bit upsetting? Maybe, but is it a deal breaker? No. Will men still date you? Yes. Will men marry you? Of course they will. Is it even that hard to learn? No. It's a box that does all the work. You put the clothes in the box, you put a little pot in there, a little bit of detergent, you press a button on the machine, it does all the work. You don't have one of those old-fashioned, sorry, my arm's getting tired, shaking a little bit. You don't have one of those old-fashioned like washing boards where you're sitting there for hours just scrubbing clothing. You don't do that anymore. So don't pretend like you're doing something that's super extremely difficult or super extremely like draining. Watching kids. You're both parents. You should both take care of the kids. If you find a husband that's unwilling to help you take care of the kids, that's a personal problem. You pick bad partners. That's not an issue of men expecting you to take care of kids. Now, if a man's working a lot and he's doing other things that are important to the family, and he expects you to put a little bit more time to raise a kid, especially because maybe the kids just want to be around you more than their dad, which I found statistically true. A lot of kids nowadays prefer to be with their mother. Actually, I found that a lot of kids prefer to be with their mother, or they prefer to be with their TV or their iPhone or their iPad more than their own father. If that's the case, then yeah, naturally, if the kids prefer to be around you more because maybe you're nicer or more compassionate than their father is, that's not the man expecting you to take care of the kids. That's just the kids preferring to be with you more. It's the kids, I guess, problem, or your problem for having kids. I don't really know, but hopefully you understand the point that I'm making. And these things are still very tiny. Again, the original premise, only men benefit from marriage. I have not seen this to be true. So, I don't know. I just want to kind of make, I guess, a short video to kind of rant, see other people's perspectives. I, by the way, am still open to people proving that premise to be true. I'm super open to it. If you have some good data, like good data, really good data that objectively shows the study, shows objectively how only men benefit from marriage or how men mostly benefit from marriage compared to women. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. I'll sit there and read it. Maybe I'll even do a video like going through it live. Maybe I'll do that one day, actually. If someone has a good study, leave it in the comments below. Maybe I'll like live stream it somewhere, either here or Instagram, and I'll read it and talk about it as I read it. But yeah, I am just super disappointed when I see like really bad research, or people see like a headline and they run with it because they want it to be true. Because that's really all this comes down to, right? The people who, I think the girls who vouched for the one girl that started the thread, really what it came down to is they wanted that to be true because it's a men versus women type thing, which I think is like, again, a super low IQ mindset. It just benefits nobody. It benefits no one. They wanted that to be true, and instead of actually doing their own research and instead of actually reading things, they just ran with that premise and they said, "Yup, this makes sense because some random person on the internet agreed with me." Low IQ stuff. I'm going to be brutally honest. It's super low IQ. We got to get rid of this type of thinking. I'm a massive advocate for people like leveling up their strategies when it comes to thinking, when it comes to kind of comprehension, and when it comes to overall just being less biased people that actually seek truth. So that's my 2 cents. Let me know what you think about it. Like I said, if you have a good study, leave it below in the comments and I'll read it. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.